Dear all, very welcome. I can barely see you, I confess, because I'm looking into the light. But very welcome everybody at the first privacy platform of 2015. And also very welcome to the panelists. I will introduce you shortly. And today we'll be discussing a topic that we also discussed a couple of years ago when we were still very much ahead of the troops. Privacy or data protection and competition policies, because we very often discuss data protection from the angle of data protection laws, but there is of course also the competition dimension to the whole thing, and this is becoming more and more relevant and more topical. Against the we're holding this panel here today against the backdrop of a dispute which emerged in these days between the banks and other payment service providers. In this case, we're talking about big companies like Apple and Google. And the banks who are suddenly very reluctant to share their customer data with these other payment service providers. Now, I have to say that I'm very touched by their sudden concern for the privacy of their customers. But of course, it is just a competition issue, because payment service providers other than banks are competitors. So this is a very clear and topical example of how data have become the subject of competition policies as well. And a couple of years ago, we had a similar platform meeting in the presence of then Commissioner Almunia, who I think also for the first time realized that data protection is actually also very much linked to competition policies. So without much further ado, I will introduce the panelists to you. First, to my far left, the newly appointed EDPS, Mr. Giovanni Buttarelli. Very pleased to have the honor to have you here for the first time in your new capacity, your new role. We've invited you not only because of that, but also because the EDPS last year issued a very interesting paper precisely on the link between data protection policies and competition policies. To my left, and to Mr. Buttarelli's right, Mr. Morten Messerschmidt, my colleague from the European Parliament, and this year's rapporteur for the competition policy report, the annual report issued by the European Parliament, Mr. Messerschmidt from Denmark and the ECR group. Then to my far right, Mrs. Sophie Moonen. I pronounced this the Dutch way, I'm sorry. From DG Competition from the European Commission. And then finally to her left, my right, Mr. Kevin Voges, who's going to share with us his practical experience as a business providing, let's say, financial services and competing with the banks where personal data is playing a key role. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to do a short introduction of, let's say, maximum 10 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to debate. So I believe I will just hand over the microphone to Mr. Buttarelli, who will kick off.
Thank you, Sophie, for your kind words and introduction, and of course for this useful invitation. This is the first 2015 privacy platform, but on this issue you are following a previous event, and I must say that our opinion adopted in June last year comes in terms of great inspiration for what you did, and so thank you for relaunching this important discussion. Why the EDPS? In a difficult moment, meaning the extended mandate, waiting for the completion of the selection procedure of the new team, has adopted an initiative in this area, because the opinion was not named as we do normally as an opinion. We named that as a preliminary position, preliminary opinion. And we wanted to encourage an holistic approach to upholding the interests of the individual in the digital economy. And therefore, we have been delighted about the results we achieved in the workshop organized in Brussels. You can see from our website how distinguished competition experts, including today's panelists, contributed to the debate involving legal academics, NGOs, as well as international organizations like the OECD. The EDPS and myself continue to recognize that the digital economy as an important value. We are ready to work on the perspectives in terms of prosperity and well-being. So we will consider the development of the data protection framework also in the perspective of the data-driven economy. But as well as mentioned in the White House report last year, these big changes and challenges can create asymmetries of power between the citizen and those controlling information about them. And therefore, apart from the well-known risks in terms of discrimination, but that's another story, we would like to better analyze how consumers may have opportunities, but also how they can negatively affected by the lack of measures allowing them to better monitor what is happening. And we need to respond to this, and we would like to see better interacting competition and data protection laws to be used more intelligently and in tandem. A short comment on accountability and responsibility. On one side, data protection regulators should perhaps build more and understand better how competition enforcement works in practice. We are not really expert on competition, though we are largely lawyers, but we understand from our side that the antitrust rules treat companies like responsible adults, meaning that, for instance, since 2013, I'm referring to Regulation 1/2003, companies do not longer have to notify horizontal cooperation agreements to the Commission, and therefore they are expected to assess their own compliance with rules under Article 101 of the treaty. So the so-called self-assessment approach. And therefore it's an approach like the one you have in the criminal law, meaning that ignorance of competition rules is no defense where a company is found in breach of competition rules. And this allows me to make a link to the ongoing process on the data protection reform, where we would like to move away from notification of data processing operations and to encourage an accountable new process, a new deal in terms of accountability. And this explains why we have new provisions on, for instance, impact assessment. And we think that this should also build on the recent case concerning the Costasia case, the Google Spain judgment. But also other links could be considered, for instance, those in terms of sanctions for breaches of competition law, which are formidable. Only last year, 953 million euro fine was imposed on a cartel in the market for car and truck bearings. The maximum fine is around 10% of the total group turnover. And therefore, I'm impressed to see that recent developments in the data protection area go in the same direction. Let me only refer to the DPA of my country of origin. Last year, they have applied to Google €1 million fine because of the Google Street View service, and Google paid without any discussion. As you know, it relates to the 2010 case where the Google cars were driving without, a fully transparent approach. And I'm sure that the French CNIL will be proud to speak about the €1,500 fine applied last year, again on Google, for violating rules on tracking and storing user information. A short comment on portability, because one of the innovations of the data protection reform is exactly on this right, which is not entirely new. Some adjustments are still needed, and we would like to see the potential to enhance competitiveness. So we would like to see how this would free consumers from ties from a particular service, how this could empower them to take their personal data to another providers. We understand that this implies a reasonable degree of interoperability. So question is to see how companies will respect the right to information, how users will be informed about what data is held on them and by whom. In this debate, important is to note that President Juncker has recently highlighted the need to overcome silo mentalities and to work better across portfolios. We understand that in the competition area, there is still a need to work on cases instead of policies. We are not asking to fully embed data protection rules in competition law, and we understand that there are different models, but it's time to ensure better interoperability in between consumer law, competition law, and data protection. And this is also an exercise for us. I'm encouraged that the new Commission is prioritizing the digital single market. I know that Commissioner Vestager is mindful of the need for competition authorities to monitor and better respond to digital markets. So I'm not saying, again, that we should be on top of their priorities, but I'm saying that the dynamics of digital markets, which are increasingly fueled by personal data on a massive scale, should be more carefully studied in order to address imbalances which could damage competitiveness as well as individual rights. A competition authority is rarely responsible only for competitiveness in the market. DG Competition is a beautiful star in the confirmation firmament, but the Commission is more than a competition authority. In some member states, we see a phenomenon according to which, I'm referring to UK, Poland, Netherlands, Italy. In one authority, there is an increasing trend in consider both competition and consumer protection supervisions. We can also quote the FTC Federal Trade Commission template where they have multiple functions, again combining antitrust and consumer privacy. So in conclusion, and then I think I can go back to a few other points, I think it's time to consider not as unreasonable to expect much more holistic decision on competition and consumer cases. with a view to balance all relevant interests and analyze how all the incoming rules on data protection can fit into the bigger data world. I think it's time also for us as data protection regulators to approach to this issue with a really and truly innovative thinking. We cannot simply continue to predicate data protection principles in the old-fashioned way. This is not the moment to reinvent the wheel, particularly the data protection principles, but to make them more effective in practice. And it also means that from our side, we should be aware of the dynamics of the competition and consumer law. So there is increasingly a big deal of interaction, and we are available, as well as all other national authorities, to work better on that.
Okay, thank you very much. At the end of your speech, you've lost your identity. Thank you, Giovanni. Then I'm going to immediately ask my colleague Morten Messerschmidt to elaborate further. I saw you nodding in agreement, so we're curious to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me as the EP rapporteur on competition policies. We will actually have the final committee discussion on the report, or my draft report, this afternoon. And in the light of that coming debate, I will, irrespective of how tempting it is, I will refrain myself to a detailed analysis of the Google case, which you have opened, because that might jeopardize the delicate compromise which we are trying to achieve among the groups right now. So I'll try to focus on the topic here from a more broad competitive perspective, as what I think and what I hope will be the priorities for the coming work within the Parliament, the Commission, the Council, and so on. It's an old truth to say that the competition policy, just in general, is here in order to ensure a level playing field across the single market, respecting all the national diversities, as well as giving companies a continued incentive to make their production and distribution more efficient. Yet, none of these achievements are possible if we don't have trust in the inner market. In ourselves as consumers, in our authorities, as has been mentioned, in our companies and their behavior. Trust that we all obey the same rules, the same set of regulations. And that those who don't play by the rules then, of course, get severe punishments. You mentioned the Google case in Italy. In some circumstances, I'm not even sure that €1 billion is sufficient. I remember the Microsoft case, where it was actually I can comment on that because it's closed, where it was actually an assessment from the company whether just to continue the bundle practice, because with the bundle product, it actually on a daily basis earned more money than the Commission could fine them. So we need to discuss the possibilities of the sanctions. Obviously, when the world is changing, new opportunities arise. Opportunities for using the new means, but also opportunities of abuse. And we as politicians, if we don't manage to tackle these possibilities of abuse, we jeopardize the trust which is so important for the entire market to work. And if we jeopardize the trust, no regulation will ever be strong enough to maintain the inner market. Therefore, I strongly congratulate the initiative here today and the opportunity to address you as the rapporteur. We need to ensure the basic trust in the inner market in order to keep consumers, investors, companies and citizens believing, having faith in the system of a free and fair trade. And here data protection is not only a key element, but one of the absolute key questions. Who would ever trade on the internet had we just the slightest fear that our payment card information were not safe? Who could ever do commerce on the net if we weren't sure that no one would be looking over our shoulder? Preserving our digital economy and creating an inner digital market is an absolute illusion without advanced protection of our data. The digital economy holds many advantages for consumers and citizens in general. Masses of personal information are disclosed by over 360 69 million internet EU users through their consumption of social media, games, search engines, e-commerce, and other services. A 2012 special Eurobarometer report on cybersecurity showed that 72% of the respondents are concerned that their online personal information is not kept secure by websites. This fact should raise great concern, especially when personal data is becoming a type of asset for companies used for the purpose of value creation, comparable to copyrights, patents, and so on. The treatment of personal data information is certainly a booming industry these years. In the case, consumer protection policy should be aimed to prohibit abuse access to private information and its commercial manipulation. The scope for abuse of market dominance and harm to the consumer through misleading privacy policies may justify a new concept of consumer harm for competition enforcement in our digital economy, and that needs to be taken seriously by the Commission introducing new legislation. 2 years ago, 2012, well, sorry, 3 years ago, a new legal framework was proposed, though, by the Commission on privacy and electronic communications, containing specific rules on privacy in relation to digital technologies and electronic communication services, noting in particular that, and I quote, "The successful cross-border development of these services is partly dependent on the confidence of users that their privacy will not be at risk," end quote. I don't agree with these words. The success of a digital inner market is not partly depending on the confidence of its users. It's entirely depending on it. EU antitrust law applies wherever any economical activity may affect trade between EU member states. Enforcement of competition rules therefore often involves an evaluation of the market power of the company and market structure through an assessment of market share, the company's turnover or volume or value of total sales of the relevant market in the relevant area to the various other undertakings activity in the market. Market dominance becomes likely where a company's market share equals or exceeds 40%. For measuring market share in one specific sector relevant to digital economy, Commission guidelines recommend the selection of whichever criteria are the most appropriate in the light of the characteristics of the market. Yet to me, this sounds like yesterday's policies. We need to address this to the realities of the new world, of the new conditions as we have it in the internet. In my view, the antitrust and data protection policies should therefore be updated and modernized. Abuse of market dominance in the digital economy should be clearly defined, as it is not today. In order to respond to rapid technological developments and globalization, the EU should adopt a future-proof regulatory approach to digital services, taking into account the increasing sensitivity from customers concerning the privacy and security of their data. The recent regulation on websites cookies is only a wonderful example of old-time thinking, old-time regulation being applied, but not solving the problems of our life. Quite at the contrary, as a matter of fact. Today, many just approve without having read what they approve, because they feel that they have to in order to access whatever website they are using. We all know it. When we access whatever website, we are asked, do you want to approve to have cookies? And because we are so used to this question, we just press yes. And in private law, an approval is serious business. Therefore, in our legislation, we need to take these challenges much more seriously and make legislation that correspond to the reality. For instance, only request the approval if there is a potential breach of your privacy law, not just as an automatic thing that will make the consumer say yes to anything. The updated legislation must increase confidence of citizens in protection of their individual rights for privacy, increasing companies' opportunities to grow their digital services, but respecting the right to digital data. We must be ambitious for the entire EU in developing a true digital single market. But in order to do this, we cannot allow a single-line approach, as has also been mentioned by my esteemed co-speaker. The launch of a digital market must at least address the following issues, therefore. Trust, privacy and data protection itself, cybercrime and security, digital content and copyright, interoperability and open standards, or at least common standards, that will be a beginning, e-payments, electronic contracting, tendering and invoicing, e-government, digital infrastructure, e-procurement, public sector information and open data, just to start with. All this cannot be regarded as individual cases, but as a collective body which will only enable then our new digital economy, our new digital inner market. If not, all efforts will be wasted. If not, we not only risk the opportunities just in front here of us developing our digital economy, we risk the successes of the past as well, because we jeopardize the validity of our entire system. This is crucial to understand. That is the key message to send today, that if we don't update our system, we will lose the faith in the system that we have gained in the past. Therefore, I congratulate my colleague, Sophie and Veld, in her initiative here, inviting me, and I wish all of you here today a great success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you underlined very well that the link between competition policies and data protection is a two-way link, and I think it also reminds me that many people have forgotten this, and I'll never tire of repeating it, that data protection used to be the remit of the DG responsible for the internal market. It has moved to Justice and Home Affairs later on, but it was at the time the responsibility of the Commissioner for the Internal Market, and it's for a reason that in the United States it's also the responsibility, one of the main responsibilities of the Federal Trade Commission. I'm going to invite the next speaker, Mrs. Moonen from DG Competition, and I was thinking also, listening to the two previous speakers, we've heard the name Google, and then everybody, of course, thinks about the current investigation of the European Commission. But there was an earlier case in 2007 when about the merger between Google and DoubleClick, and I think that was the first time when, at least for me, the quarter dropped, that there is a direct connection between the use of personal data, data protection, and competition policies. And I've already heard here from the two previous speakers terms like market dominance, asymmetry of power, consumer choice, consumer power. And I think that it took the Commission a while to understand the link between the two. And maybe in hindsight, they wouldn't necessarily automatically approve that merger today. If we look at the role that personal data are now playing in the economy. And I'm also thinking of the recommendations that the European Parliament made in the report on mass surveillance and interception by NSA and other agencies, where we came to the realization that the fact that there are a couple of global near monopolists make it very difficult for us Europeans to have our own policies when it comes to security, for example, and protection of personal data. So there too, competition plays a major role. And it was said at the time we need more, as we called it, EU IT independence, or in any case, European consumers need more choice. There has to be more competition. So having said all that, I'm going to invite Mrs. Moonen of the Commission to elaborate on all this. You have the floor.
Hello, yes. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me today to talk about, this indeed much topical subject of the interaction of competition policy and data protection. I will start with the disclaimer that the views expressed today are my own. So indeed, what role does data play in the assessment of competition cases? And we are confronting these issues in an increasing number of cases. As the previous two speakers have mentioned, obviously these issues goes much beyond, the realms of competition law. So, I mean, here what I'm trying to do, I have a short presentation, is, maybe give you some of the ideas of, how this issue has come into play in recent cases, mostly merger cases, and within the limits of, what competition law can do. Competition law, as we mentioned already, deals with cases, cannot, but that being said, I mean, as a, we do a lot also of competition advocacy. I mean, competition has benefits of, improving markets with all the benefits, for the economy at large, of efficient allocation of resources, growth, consumer choice. And for instance, things, if we come and talk about things like ensuring interoperability or the portability of data, I mean, we've not had issues, cases dealing with this specifically. But, I mean, as a matter of policy, this is something as a, competition advocacy that we would very much support, because, I mean, all of these type of measures go in the directions of giving customers and consumers more control over, over their data and more choice. Just very briefly, you all know what personal data and information it can identify individuals, and this is being protected by data protection laws. Big data, that's a recent occurrence. I mean, these are these very, very large data sets. And this is, really the new wave of the economy, that, companies can collect, store, analyze, and that, can be very useful in the digital economy. And they are actually, data can in a way be used as a raw material in the information economy, and maybe an essential one in some cases. And there are many firms that have built businesses around the collection of use of data, that either, they might sell it to other firms, or, they might use it in-house to also improve their own goods and services, because, that tells them about, how consumers use services, what they need. An example is in the search business, Google. They collect and they can see what search queries, users are doing, and then they can actually better refine, what people are really looking for, and build it into their algorithm so that, the product gets better. And, this is where, that might be a scale advantage as well. Similarly also in targeted advertising, if you have data about customers, behavior and preferences, and you would be able to serve ads and that are of more relevance to these customers and that are more effective. So this is why data has value and is one of the inputs. In two-sided markets, I mean, these are, for instance, all the realm of these free products, free services. I mean, in the digital economy, many times, consumers, have services for free. If you think of social networking services, search services on Google, music, streaming. But, I mean, there are different business models. Some are freemium, where you have a free service that's basic, and then, for more functionalities, you pay something. But in reality, it's never really free. And I mean, this is why we also see these markets, these services as markets. And what we see actually as the price that consumers may pay on the consumer-facing side of that market is actually the personal data that they volunteer, directly or indirectly, about directly if they, provide information about themselves, and indirectly about, what they're listening to, what website they're visiting, these type of things, and that would be the free, the currency for this market. So moving to competition policy and data protection, it's in itself. So I mean, privacy violations, and there was a Court of Justice judgment, back in 2006. Primarily that's to be tackled by data protection policy. There's a legislation in Europe. We care a lot about this, and it just applies across the board to all types of firms, and that's actually a better place where to start to actually ensure a high degree of data protection. And competition policy dealing with specific cases, might not be, the best place, to tackle these issues. We have some constraints. But that being said, I mean, the use of big data and personal data can also be relevant to competition cases, because as we see, data as actually a value. I mean, so the type of situation that, what we have, looked at is, as I mentioned, big data as an asset. So in markets, for instance, if there would be a merger, we've had a consistent practice, and, more and more so, we will check whether the merger and the combination of big data sets could be such as to give a merged entity an insurmountable advantages over their competitors, one that competitors cannot match after the merger. And this is, for example, was examined in Google DoubleClick. On my next slide, I mentioned other cases. For instance, there's a case that we call the M-commerce case. That was a joint venture that was cleared between 3 mobile telephony operators in the United Kingdom: Telefonica, Vodafone, and Everything Everywhere, together covering 90%. Pretty much, I mean, a bit less because they are mobile virtual network operators, but of mobile telephony users. And they were having a joint venture to create a platform for mobile payments. And this platform, they were also going to collect some data and offer mobile advertising. And some of the data that were collected, they could be used also to provide data analytics services. So where you provide third parties information about products and services and consumer behavior that can help. So, I mean, there we also looked at this. Another more recent case was a merger in the advertising sector, Publicis Omnicom. Interestingly, that one never, didn't materialize because, the companies in the end, could not reach an agreement on their governance, and the merger didn't go through, but we actually had a notification, reviewed it, and there, in the area of advertising, one of the arguments that the parties were making was that, this merger is important, for online advertising, big data will be able to actually develop more in-house products to actually better target, advertising. And so again, each time we were checking, are there alternatives, for competitors? Is it going to, put the merged entity in a type of gatekeeper role and have an advantage that no one else can match? So that's one line of assessment, where this is relevant from a competition perspective. Now, as I mentioned, restriction on data portability, that's maybe more for an antitrust type of case, could increase switching costs and entry barriers. So, I mean, when we define markets and before we apply competition rules, we also will try to see, what's the market position? Does this firm have market power? And of course, it's very much a fact-based exercise. We try to see, what is the functioning of the market. And for instance, if this is a service for which, it's important for customers to have access to their data, and actually, not having access to this data with the new provider would be really a big disadvantage. I mean, there you can really see that makes the market not very fluid. I mean, that could potentially, if the circumstances and the market specifics are right, that would be part of the finding that, yes, this is a market with high entry barriers, or, or the current position of the players is more entrenched than in a market where, things, can move more freely and, there's no cost for customers to switch. And a final way, where, this could be relevant, but it's, a bit more innovative, is personal data as currency. So as I mentioned, makes it to market, and privacy as a dimension of, competition and product quality. As I mentioned, competition is supposed to bring benefits in terms of, consumer choice, lower prices, better quality, innovative products and services. And when firms compete, they compete on, a lot of parameters of competition. I mean, they'll try to have the best product that customers want. In some markets, the brand, look at Apple, could be very important. Prices, in other markets, or for, price-sensitive customers, price might be the most important dimension of competition. And in that respect, privacy or, the privacy policy of a firm can be, for some consumers, an important parameter of competition. And in that sense, that could be something, when we analyze a market and the workings of a market, we would take this into account. I mean, again, I think we have to take markets, as they are when we assess them. So we try to understand how they work and what the position of the player is, and, what's likely to happen, or what. And actually, if we, again, in the right sets of circumstances, we might find that this would be, this would be an important element. So, I mean, just a little overview of the big data, the cases in which big data was assessed. As Mrs. Intervell mentioned, Google DoubleClick back in 2008 was one of them. I mean, this was an acquisition by Google of DoubleClick, and DoubleClick was a firm that was specializing in ad serving technology. So actually, Google has data through the search behavior of consumers. I mean, they keep and they track the different searches done. And DoubleClick was actually tracking web browsing behavior. And the concern was, the combination of those two data sets could give, Google, after the merger, an advantage that, competitors could not match. But, I mean, the decision on this, when first did not address the search market because there was no overlap. So most of the assessment was about, online advertising and all the different value chains in online advertising. And what we found in that case is that combination of Google's data on search behavior and DoubleClick's data on browsing behavior would not give them a competitive advantage in the advertisement business that could not be replicated by other market participants, because they had access to similar web usage data that DoubleClick had, because there are other firms that do this type of things, and they were alternatives. Microsoft Yahoo, that was a 3-2 merger in the search market. So these were, prior to the merger, there were two competitors to Google. In the EEA, Google is actually quite dominant, even more than in the US. So, I mean, as a starting point, this was, even though it was a 3-2, we looked at it very closely. But what we concluded was that actually the merger would give greater scale, which was a problem of Microsoft Bing, because scale is important in this business. I mean, the value of the search logarithm is a function of how much it is used. And Yahoo was not perceived as not very innovative, so actually they would benefit from Microsoft's innovation. And overall, this would create a stronger competitor to Google. And the merger was cleared for that. And in terms of the big data, because of the importance of scale, Google did not think that the firm having incremental data advantage would be such as to change its position. I mean, and overall, really this merger was rather pro-competitive. I had already mentioned the next one, which is this mobile platform for mobile payments and mobile advertising. And then lastly, I have a few slides on Facebook WhatsApp, which was the most recent case we dealt with this fall. And we looked into these issues. I mean, is data as an asset? And there, the facts were the following. Facebook collects data, its user data, and provides with this data, this is the other side of the platform, a targeted advertising service. And WhatsApp did not collect any data. There's no advertising on the consumer app of WhatsApp. So, you didn't have any combination of data sets, nothing changing there. We nevertheless went very far, and we assessed whether after the merger, Facebook would somehow be able to change the policy of WhatsApp. And we assumed that this would be the case for the purpose of the assessment. Because, we thought it was unlikely they would have the incentive to do so, but, nevertheless, if they would start collecting data from WhatsApp's users that are also Facebook users, would they then, be able to have an advantage for advertising on Facebook? And there we found that, in fact, there are lots of other companies. In the online advertising world, our market investigation showed that there's a lot of alternative providers of that, and there are a lot of companies that have access to user data that is not within the control of Facebook and is of equal, value as well. So it's quite a fragmented world there in that sense, and we couldn't really see that this would change and strengthen Facebook in another way. And then in terms of privacy, the dimension of product quality that I mentioned there, what we looked at, this market, it's free, mostly free consumer communication apps. So the apps that you have on your mobile phone that allow you to text, share photos, share, sometimes it might become voice over IP as well. And these typically, privacy is one of the parameters. Consumers, there's a growing importance, especially after the NSA, that consumers value the privacy. But it was, there were other parameters, price, the fact it's free or not, some are paying, the reliability of the service, the functionalities offered, how, the interface, consumers liked it, the size of the network, how many of your friends and other people would be, using the same apps, the trendiness, think of Snapchat or, some of these. And privacy was really not the only one. And there actually, in any way, some exception, there were some apps that offered increased security with encryption, such as Threema or Telegram. So, I mean, there are, in this case, the combination and the merge of these two service providers, was not such as to reduce consumer choice, because they were actually not really competing much on that. But you could imagine conceptually a case where there would be the two main ones and the two main that compete on this parameter of competition, and that, after the merger could be degraded because, there would be less of an incentive to do so, because this was your closest competitor and the one that was also very strong for privacy. But that was not the case here. And what we just say in our decision also, that of course it's without prejudice to application of data protection laws. And just just to say that there is some interaction between data protection and competition policy. Data collection playing a growing role in new business models. We will face more and more such cases. And we can expect that this will continue to feature maybe increasingly prominently in the assessment of digital mergers. And we are developing a conceptual framework to look at these cases. So far we've not had a case where this was the make or break of the case, but of course we cannot rule it out for the future.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know, I just have a hunch that the last speaker is going to immediately counter your last conclusion. Because we're going to, the last speaker is going to address the issue of data portability and the role it plays as a in competition. And he will probably demonstrate, knowing him, that data portability is essential for competition, for innovation, and for the development of the digital economy, which is one of the priorities of the European Commission. And this also plays a role in the Payment Services Directive, which is currently under negotiation, and for which I have the honor to be the shadow rapporteur. Maybe I can describe Mr. Voges a bit like David challenging Goliath. So I give you the floor, and you can demonstrate how data portability becomes a competition issue for you.
Well, thank you so much for that nice introduction, Sophie. And thank you for having me. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Voges. I founded a company 6 years ago as a student, and we built a platform in which we aggregate different financial accounts into one place, and we show you basically exactly where you spend your money on and how much budget you have left for the month. We founded the company in 2007. We got funding in 2009. We came Website of the Year in 2010 in the Netherlands. We're based in the Netherlands. And we got acquired by AFAS, which is why we are called AFAS Personal at the moment, which is a family-owned company which also builds ERP software. What we basically do is very simple. We aggregate the financial transactions based on Excel exports that you can get within your banking environment. We have tried to make this a lot easier for our users during the past 6 years, and I'll try to explain why this is a hurdle and what our experience is with, for example, the financial institutions in the Netherlands. Just for the extra information, because I had the different questions already, how do we earn money? We have a freemium model with a basic version which is free, without advertisements, without selling data, and we have a paid version with all the functionality. We have almost 600,000 users at the moment, and we're growing pretty fast with about 5,000 users a month. So how has our solution worked during the past 6 years? Well, it's very, very simple, as you can see. You log on to your internet banking environment, you go to your latest transactions, you find somewhere where you can download your latest transactions. You then have to choose a period, a file type. You have all sorts of different file types because banks like to differentiate and not make it easy. You have to save that file somewhere. Well, I can tell you, my mom likes to use our solution, but she can't, because this step, saving that file somewhere, she can get to that step, but eventually she won't know where she had saved that file on her computer. So if you manage that, you can log out of your internet banking environment, you log on back to our personal finance platform, and you import that file. Which is really, okay, it's successful, but then you have to repeat those steps for all your different banks. And in the Netherlands, consumers have, on average, 3.6 bank accounts by different institutions. And that's not hard. I mean, you can have a personal account, a joint account, a credit card somewhere else, and of course a savings account somewhere else, because the normal banks don't give you a lot of rent these days. So this is a very difficult solution, and it's not surprising that the #1 consumer request, which we have asked a lot, of course, is that they want to be able to do this automatically. This is, of course, a complete user-based consent. They want to be able to give their consent to their bank that they want the personal finance application to be able to access their data. And of course, that's how the way you want it to work. You don't want to log into your personal finance application after the fact that you did payments that went over budget. You want to be able to log on to your personal finance application, have an up-to-date overview, a consolidated, user-friendly overview, before you make any purchases that might get you into trouble. And we even digged in a bit further.
Maybe if you can go back for the 1 or 2 persons in the room who do not read Dutch.
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
You may wish to translate what
yes.
you said.
The question here is, would you like to have a connection between our platform and your internet banking environment, so that you will never have to update your account manually again? And of the almost 5,000 people that answered this, 75% said yes. And we digged a bit further. We also asked what kind of connection would you like to have? Is that a one-time consent, which afterwards the connection is made automatically? Or you would like to keep on updating manually? Or you want to give the consent every single time? And as you can see, the majority here said they want a one-time consent. And in this case, if you look at the amount, it's more than 80%. So, yeah, of course, we as a company tried to automate this. We're a software company. We like automation, and we like making things simple for our users. And our experience with the banks in general is they're absolutely not willing to cooperate. What we have seen is when we launched our solution in 2009, it took about 2 years for the banks to launch their own solutions, their own personal finance applications, which are, of course, restricted to their own banking accounts and environments, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a consolidated overview of all your personal finances. They have no priority whatsoever to actually facilitate this connection. They see it as a threat. They have even told us that they see us as one of their biggest competitors in the next 5 years. And more importantly, there's no incentive for them to do so, because they don't want to have financial smarter customers. They want to be able to lower the rent without you knowing. They want you to get a credit for 14% while you have some savings, which you can neutralize that. And they're very much afraid of losing customer contact, because for them, customer contact is cross-selling and upselling. And that's something they are going to protect as much as possible. And of course, in the past 2 years, we've been talking about the Payment Service Directive, the upcoming revised Payment Service Directive. And they have lobbied very much so to exclude these types of services and make it basically impossible for consumers to choose to use these services. And it's funny because when I talk to people in Brussels, the first question I get asked is, so what company are you guys using to lobby for you? I'm like, I'm a one-man show here. It's just me. And that just tells me how much money is being spent by the financial institutions to not advocate let's say the consumer's perspective, but their own perspective. And what makes it really interesting, our case, is that after 6 years, or basically 5.5 years of trying to automate this in every single imaginable way with cooperation with the banks, either technology-wise or cooperative-wise. We basically said, okay, you're not going to help us, so we're going to build a solution which enables our customers to do it themselves. So what did we do? We built an overlay solution, which is also very much discussed in different cases. An overlay solution is basically we provide an interface in which consumers can use their banking in-log credentials to log on to their internet banking environment via our platform and update their account automatically. We did this in the best way possible. We did not store these credentials. Most of the banks in the Netherlands also use two-factor authentication, so even if we would store them, we wouldn't be able to do anything behind their backs. We introduced this in June last year, and in July we got taken to court by one of these 4 banks, and they successfully took us to court because we got banned by the judge of providing our solution. Which is strange because there are some parties, our companies in the Netherlands and in Europe, which actually do provide these services, and the banks had specifically targeted us to stop providing this overlay service. So basically, we are trying to automate a manual process which our users have to go through every single time they want to become financially smarter. And consumers are being denied easy data portability. For use of their own data, of their own choosing, in a service of their own choosing, to add value, and it's purely because of anti-competitive practices. If you hear this discussion from a financial institution's perspective, it'll probably be because of data protection, it'll probably be because of privacy, it'll probably be because of security. Well, I can tell you, we're a software company which manages financial accounts for more than 600,000 users. I can't tell you how much we are doing for those 3 things, because if we don't, then we can basically pack our bags and go home if something happens. So it's in our best interest to provide the best levels of security, data protection, and privacy that we can imagine. Just to provide an overview of the companies that are actually using overlay services to provide this type of service in the market. Yodlee is one of the largest data aggregators in the world, with more than 55 million consumer accounts being aggregated every single day to provide, for example, personal finance budgeting tools of up-to-date information. Our goal is very simple. We just want to have a one-time user consent-based connection, a read-only connection, which is tokenized, so we don't basically have to know everything about this customer, because that's the bank's issue. They have the KYC. They need to know everything. We don't need to know, and we only want to do read-only because we're providing oversight and actionable insights, and we're not doing payments. So I hope this has been a bit clear about how trying to make the data portability a lot harder than it should be and could be these days is an anti-competitive practice, because people who want to, by their own willing, and know exactly what they're doing with their data, because this has been happening since 1994, people have been making Excel sheets to monitor their budgets, and we're just automating the process for them. It's basically really denying a lot of people a value-added service. I'll keep it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I can hear spontaneous enthusiasm in the audience, and I somehow also have the feeling, judging the look on the face of Mrs. Moonen, that you'll be exchanging calling cards afterwards, because I think it's an interesting case, one that illustrates perfectly what we've been discussing today. Okay, we have about 20 minutes left. I'm going to open the floor for questions and debate, but I'm first going to ask Mr. Buttarelli and Mrs. Moonen if they would want to briefly respond, very briefly, and then I'm going to ask those in the audience who want to ask a question to really stick to 1 minute maximum religiously, and also introduce yourself. Mr. Buttarelli?
Thank you, Sophie. just to jump on the two cases mentioned by Mrs. Moonen and Sophie too in today's debate. We have been quiet after our workshop in June, but we got a lot of feeling as, in the meantime, working towards an increased dialogue. And this is the main message for me. And exactly from her intervention, I see a strong need to improve in terms of quality of this debate. She mentioned and you too, the Google double-click merger in 2008. On this case, many comments we got are on the fact that the Commission did not consider the impact on customers of the two companies being able to combine all the data and potentially used for incompatible purposes. And the same concern was recently passed to us with regard to the WhatsApp Facebook case. What about the privacy agreement signed by WhatsApp customers against the different business model from Facebook? A big company we repeatedly mentioned today has reported that they have acquired since 2010 one company per week. So it means that Peter Fleischer. It means that this analysis in terms of purpose limitation and fairness versus customers need to be evaluated in the new perspective. If you go to a recent important book from Jaron Lanier, The Dignity in Internet, you will see he describes how servers will develop in 5 up to 20 years from now, and he said that the added value of the use of information will be increasingly invisible, being embedded into statistics, into probabilities, and it will be extremely difficult for investigating authorities to detect it, and the same for data subjects exercising their right of access. So it will be difficult to print I mean, the kind of information that they have, because the information will be in the cloud and difficult to be decrypted. What it means? It means that it's time for moving from the old-fashioned approach on silos to a new one. Sophie too look like as a best example of an open-minded approach where they not only consider competition law in terms of economic market effects, so that she's inclined to consider also other public concerns. So we would like that competition authorities, consumer authorities, better consider the impact of the control of the personal data in terms of distortion in the market. So this is the perspective, and the question is time to consider what the added value of the processing of personal information is for the future. How competition authorities could better evaluate these principles in terms of data protection. Is this the right perspective to continue working on single cases, for instance? What about best practices and policies to be adopted? And what the working modalities could be. Let me conclude with just a minor recommendation. Pick up your phone and send emails. So perhaps anytime a data protection authority has a case which could be relevant at national or EU level in terms of competition law, consumer protection, could better inform the competent authorities in the other field, and vice versa, in the sense that perhaps it's time that competition authorities better consider the advice. We will respect the confidentiality of the relevant investigations when there is a serious implication in terms of fairness.
Thank you very much. Sorry for asking you to be a bit short, but we have 15 minutes left. First, I'm going to ask Mrs. Moonen if she wants to react briefly, and then we'll open the floor for debate and questions.
I mean, I'll just try to be very brief. I mean, I hear you, and I think what I try to convey in the presentation is that, and you say I have an open mind, that competition policy would not only, consider the economic market effects, but also other public concerns. But I'll have to say that within the limit that there's congruence between the two. I mean, it's through the lens of competition law, but where competition law by, enforcing consumer choice, the preservation of consumer choice and, ability and that, has the side effects of also possibly, enforcing a high degree of privacy protection or a high degree of environmental protection. But it's not the goal that, in our task that we can actually pursue as such. And, again, I think we may not, we are not well placed to do so. I mean, we're still looking at cases, so, I mean, we're open-minded, but I think we're willing to work with others, and it's actually, we consulted also on other pieces of legislation. In, the digital single market is going to involve, these type of things involve lots of different departments from the Commission. And again, also talking about your example, there might be things also that are, issues of competition advocacy, and that, sometimes competition faces the limit to ensure, the right, competition and ability, and, you need legislation for that. I mean, there are examples, where, some issues are then tackled by legislation, but we spot the sort of a malfunctioning of the market, but you're not able necessarily to do something about it. So anyway.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that was brief enough.
Yeah. No, but still I think competition policies would offer a couple of instruments, and data portability is a concept that is in data protection law, but it's also a concept that's in the Payment Services Directive, which is internal market and competition. Therefore, I think when it comes to expecting market actors to cooperate in the direction of interoperability, for example, that is very much a competition issue as well.
Absolutely, and this is, but in terms of competition advocacy, and if we were, when we are consulted on this type of pieces of legislation, you would just see this is very good, this is going to open up the market, and then with all the benefits that opening up markets have and giving, the space for new and innovative products and services like your product. But I mean, describing of this, I don't know enough the specificities of, for instance, the Dutch banking market. But in what you describe, I mean, I think you'd have to, I mean, we have to go through sort of a checklist of things, If, for instance, if it's a refusal to supply, would it be like something where they're dominant individually or collectively, and collective becomes very difficult to, or did they agree amongst themselves and you'd have to prove it? I mean, there would be things to show, but if none of this happened, maybe it's just the way that, that's the business and it's their right to actually not compete, but then you have to find, ways to open up the market because it's good for society.
They're basically sabotaging, and there's this young man taking all the big banks. Anyway, I'm going to not dominate the speaking time anymore, monopolize it. I think I saw one request for the floor. I'm going to take you in batches of 3. Any other requests for the floor? 2? Okay, batches of 2 then. We'll start with you. Can everybody who takes the floor please state your name and the organization you represent?
Thank you, Sophie. Sophie 1. Actually, Auke Haagsma. I'm here as an independent consultant, but I have to be very transparent. I also represent ICOMP, which is a complainant in the Google case. I will not refer to that. It's clear we're not talking about it. But I would like to take Mr. Buttarelli's argument up, because I think it is, when I listen to Sophie Moonen, it's on the one hand, it's very encouraging. On the other hand, I mean, I was in DG4 many moons ago. And DG4, we were very proud that we were separate from the Commission. I thought in the current Commission that was different, that there was a lot more cooperation. And in the end, there's only one Commission, because Mr. Buttarelli, that's the only point where I disagree with you a bit. It's not a competition authority. There's only one Commission. So I mean, isn't it necessary? And I thought that everything in the Commission had changed now in its way of operating. There was always this very clear distinction between DG Comp and DG Justice, and isn't there a tendency now to discuss these matters more as a team? I hear Mr. Oettinger yesterday speaking out about the competition case against Google. Isn't at least in the analysis, isn't it necessary to have much more cooperation between the various services, to have an extended case team, if you wish? Is that something that is happening? And if then in the end, perhaps you can be convinced, even by your colleagues from DG Justice, that perhaps there is something which you so far thought was not something you could handle under the competition rules, but perhaps there is a way to do it.
Okay, before I come back to the panel, I'm going to take 2 more questions. First, the lady, okay, 3 more questions, and then we come back to the panel. First, the lady over here, then Mark Rottenberg in the back, and then the gentleman in front of him.
Hi, my name is Marie-José Bonthuis. I'm a privacy lawyer from the Netherlands, and I have a question to Kevin. He said he went to court for the syncing tool, and I was wondering what was the legal ground of the banks.
He was taken to court.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, I heard that. But what was the case? On what ground did the bank win? Was it data protection, and on what ground? I'm very interested in that.
Okay, thank you. Mark Rottenberg.
Thank you. Very good panel. I just wanted to mention that my organization, the Electronic Privacy Information Center, participated in the competition review at the U.S. Federal Trade Commission involving both Google DoubleClick and Facebook WhatsApp. And we raised 2 different concerns. I mean, one is the concern of the dominant actor becoming more dominant and thereby creating barriers to entry for new competition and slowing innovation. The second concern, which one of your panelists mentioned, are the pre-existing commitments that the smaller firm has to its users, because of course DoubleClick had contracts with strong privacy terms, and WhatsApp had a very strong privacy policy with regard to its users. And I think as someone suggested, in the absence of some enforceable protection in the competition review, over time, those commitments can collapse, which is exactly what happened with DoubleClick. Now, as to WhatsApp and Facebook, it remains less clear what the outcome will be. The FTC got commitments from both companies based in part on our complaint that they will uphold their current privacy practices. But I think it bears watching with these consolidations what the long-term consequences will be for the people who purposefully chose the firm with a better privacy practice if that firm is subsequently acquired.
Thank you. And the last question in this round is the gentleman in front of you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Richard Spoelstra. I'm a student at Tilburg University. Actually, I have a question and not entirely sure to who to point it, but is there going to be in the near future the possibility that a competition authority will say 2 companies cannot merge not because their service will be too big, but because they will have too much personal data, the two companies combined? That's just a question I'm asking myself.
Okay, I'm going to take you from right to left. Mrs. Moonen first.
Sure. So the first question was about the Commission working together, and DG Competition not being just an agency on its own, but part of the broader Commission. I mean, maybe I've not been long enough in the Commission. I mean, actually, I've been 13 years, but we have always worked, and this is a specificity of the institutional setup of the Commission, is that, yes, I mean, DG Competition and the Commission is a competition agency, but we're part of, a broader institution. And in our ways of working, I mean, we have to consult other services depending on the subject matter, but we, when we take decisions, we consult, what are so-called associated services. And I mean, let's say if it's a media issue, there will be DG Act, DG Connect, and others. If it's in the financial area, previously DG Markt. We've had situations of extended case team that you mentioned, where we had someone from a DG with a lot of sectorial expertise, you know, somehow seconded and following closely a case, because we stand to benefit from, you know, that sectorial expertise. And conversely, when there are, you know, proposed legislation, let's say field of energy, I mean, that's something that in, you know, 10, 12 years ago in my previous job in DG competition, I was following some of that, and we would comment, and, you know, and this is where also the role as competition advocacy can play a role. We can actually also, you know, point to ways where the legislation, you know, can close off market, or on the contrary, can play a role in opening up market. And I mean, in terms of that being said, you know, what we do is subject to court review by the court. I mean, there are rights of procedural rights to respect. We have the burden of proof of showing it, because we live, you know, there's a rule of law. And, you know, we just cannot, in a case, you know, or we don't like it, we think it's not great for society or something, what this firm is doing, you know, would be better if it was something else. We can't. I mean, this is just, we have to find, you know, and there's also a body of precedent. So we have to build, I mean, we can be innovative in some situations because, of course, markets and, you know, markets change. But we have still to work within limits of what, you know, what we're enforcing. So I mean, that's sort of but I mean, that being said, it's really, I mean, we really work closely because we really benefit from the sectoral expertise of other DGs, and conversely, we try, you know, to sort of have an input in showing, you know, ways in which legislation can make a difference, you know, or, you know, the way that it is drafted could actually have very bad side effects. Now going to the next question was for you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. Before you take the floor, I think one remark that both competition authorities, not just the European Commission, but also the national ones, as well as the judiciary, they will urgently need in the next coming years a lot of technical expertise in order to, because I think that in particular in the judiciary, that is probably lacking, because judges know everything there is to know about the law, but very little about, I mean, some of them probably don't even use email. And then, you know, in order to, well, I'm not referring to anyone in particular, but so that is something that we need to invest in urgently, I think. Kevin.
Yeah, so the question was, on what grounds did the bank win its case? It was very simple. They started out stating that we were undermining the total payment industry in Europe. Which wasn't the case, because our connection, our overlay service, which we introduced, was deemed safe, because we, of course, had all our checks and controls in place. They won on the grounds that in the general terms and agreements that consumers have with their banks, it is stated that they're not allowed to use their login credentials anywhere else than the banking in-log site. And that's it. End of case. And we provided evidence to the contrary, that banks were actually, let's say, treating us differently in the market than other parties, other companies, because other companies in the Netherlands have been doing this for years to initiate payments. And yeah, well, basically the judge did not look at that argument at all. So basically, of course, we weren't psyched that we lost, but we also said, well, I mean, we have to be treated just like any other company in the market, and it's very peculiar that we got treated this way. So, let's say in that perspective, we still think that we have a case, and we're not arguing for the overlay solution, because that's a totally different discussion. We are arguing for being treated equally, and we are arguing for a solution going forward in consumers' benefits and perspective. No, we did not, because we in the 16 years of this family-owned company, we never started a court case, and we don't want court cases. And of course, if a judge rules within 3 hours that he's not going to look at all the evidence, it wouldn't really matter in an appeal, because judges will not contradict each other as easily in the Netherlands. And of course, we got a bit rattled, because maybe the information that we got provided in the market wasn't correct. So we did our research, and now we think we have a very strong case. And but we're trying to do this in different ways, because we know the Payment Service Directive is coming up. And it's more of a time issue now than what the end game will be, because the end game is almost clear, and we're very happy with that. But we do want the case of equality being sorted out.
Well, as to the Payment Services Directive, because the negotiations are about to start, and I think the issue of data portability and data protection is going to be one of the key issues, one of the sticking points in the negotiations, I expect. Giovanni.
Just to say that today's debate also shows the need to pay much more attention to services which are free or zero priced, to prevent an outcome where we have a sort of a de facto antitrust immunity for zero price marketed participants. Personal data are often described as the currency of the information society, the modern oil. So no way out than simply continue the debate. I'm not saying that competition authorities are not very well equipped to deal with data protection issues, but the evaluation of certain principles, particularly those on purpose limitation, for instance, could be better developed in cooperation with national DPAs. You may say that the aim of competition rules is to simply protect consumer welfare and not to deal with fundamental rights. But perhaps there is space for a fresh thinking to see how existing principles could be better applied in a meaningful way. So I'm sure that in the next future, increasingly, notions such as abuse of dominance, significant impediment to effective competition are to be analyzed by also considering the new trends of the big data world. In few years from now, it will be extremely difficult to identify the controllers of personal information, not speaking about the relevant purposes. And therefore, I think there is space for a different debate. I'm encouraged by, as said, not only the comments from Juncker, move from the silo perspective to a discussion across portfolios, but also from what Commissioner Vestager said in her hearing. She mentioned the need to work with her colleagues, and therefore I would like to fully share the comment that Commission is to be considered as a whole. I simply say to pay tribute to Sophie too, that DG Competition is a beautiful start, but I say they are more than a competition authority. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. We've basically already overrun our time, but I would not want to all go home and know that there is one person who cannot sleep tonight because they have this last burning question. I would not want to take responsibility for that. So is there anyone in the room who cannot sleep unless they put that question to us? No? Okay, very good. Then I'm reassured. We'll all sleep well. Thank you all very much. Thanks to the panelists. I'm very pleased we had this issue on the agenda today, and I'm pretty sure it will not be the last time we're going to discuss this. So I hope to see you all again at the next privacy platform. Thank you.